Hello, I'm Summerland Mayor Doug Holmes, and I would like to welcome you to the virtual open house for the proposed 2024 utility budgets. Thank you for tuning in. Council has completed its budget deliberations for all three district utilities, water, sewer, and electrical. Municipalities are legally required to balance all their budgets. We can't run a deficit like the provincial and federal governments can. Utilities are also heavily regulated, and our rates must take into account provincial legislation in respect to public health and environmental protection. These regulations make it difficult for us to cut costs by reducing service levels. So, for example, we can't partially treat drinking water, we can't partially treat sewage, and we can't supply electricity only at certain times of the day. Inflation is driving up the costs of supplies in all three utilities. So in setting the budgets, council has had to weigh these cost pressures with the understanding that inflation is also putting residents under financial stress. It's been a balancing act, and with this balancing act, we are proposing to increase electrical rates by 3%, mainly to account for a 6.74% increase in the cost of power that we purchase wholesale from Fortis. We have been able to absorb much of that Fortis increase because of the billing changes we made last year. For water, council is proposing a 6.78% increase. This is driven largely by the continued escalation of the price of chemicals that we need to treat drinking water, especially caustic soda and chlorine. There will be no tax increase, no rate increase in the sewer utility. However, council will be maintaining for the short term a parcel tax that was brought in to finance the now retiring debt on the sewage treatment plant. Over the next couple of years, council plans to review the billing model for sewer to make it more equitable. Unlike water and electricity, where people pay for what they use, the majority of Summerland properties pay the same rate for sewer, no matter if it's a small residential property or a large industrial operation that sends a lot of wastewater down the drain. In the meantime, the proposed 2024 rates will ensure our utility infrastructure remains in good shape and we can continue to deliver a safe and reliable service. These rates will ensure we can continue to provide clean water from the watershed to your tap. We can effectively treat the effluent flushed down your drain, and we can reliably supply electricity from the power station to your light switch. I will now turn it over to David Svedlicki, the Director of Finance for the District of Summerland, to provide details of each of the proposed utility budgets.
Rate increase, the overall impact they have on a typical home. This slide tries to provide a visual as to some of the decisions that go into putting together a financial plan. For starters, is it a new or existing project? If new, does it require additional resources? Provincial and federal regulatory requirements often force municipalities into additional expenses, be it from health and safety perspective or additional testing, and oftentimes with little to no input from the municipality. When reviewing potential projects, we also need to look at the risks associated with the project, as well as the potential consequences of not moving forward with that project. Projects with high risks and high consequences are the first to move forward in that budgeting process. Levels of service factor greatly into the financial planning process. Previous year's budgets normally set the benchmark for where a service level is at. Throughout the course of a year, the district receives many requests from residents to increase levels of service. Additionally, new development can also lead to level of service changes. The budgeting process takes these factors into consideration. One thing to note when discussing levels of service is that very rarely do residents want to see a reduction in their service levels. These increases require additional charges to the residents or, where possible, operational efficiencies to absorb those increases. Funding options definitely affect the financial plan. How will we fund the increased level of service, new project, or regulatory requirement? Should it come from the actual users of that service? If it benefits the entire organization, should it be funded through taxation? Are there grants available? Do we need to borrow money? There are many things to consider when we look at financing and funding options. And the final factor noted on this slide, and one that we're all dealing with on a daily basis, inflation and market conditions. We continue to see global demands for goods, which is causing material shortages. Couple this with the destabilized supply chain and high interest rates, and these factors have significantly impacted the proposed budget, as the mayor noted. Now, all 6 of these factors, and there are a lot more, along with council's strategic priorities, drive the final financial plan, and ultimately the rates Summerland residents are charged. Now, assets are the core of our 3 utilities. Without functioning assets, the district could not provide the vital services that each utility delivers. The next 3 slides will provide some overall context into the amount of assets needed to provide services to Summerland residents. So within the electrical utility, we have 2 substations, 9 feeders, 3,700 poles, 1,500 transformers, over 280 kilometers of overhead conductor, and 60 kilometers of underground cable, as well as approximately 1,350 streetlights. On the sewer side of things, we have 80 kilometers of pipe, 3,400 sewer connections, a wastewater treatment plant, as well as 8 lift stations. And on the water side, 220 kilometers of water mains, 6,000 water services, 440 hydrants, 12 dams, 1 treatment plant, 13 PRV stations and pump stations, and 4 in-ground storage tanks. So that's a lot of assets to take care of. Over the past few years, council has identified the importance and the need of increasing capital reserves that historically were extremely minimal. As a result of council's thoughtfulness and commitment, reserve levels have steadily begun to increase. In contrast, the district's estimated 2019 replacement cost of all of our utility infrastructure was over $360 million. This was based on the asset management work that was completed back in 2019. At that time, it was also estimated that the district's utility deficit was projected to be over $86.5 million. Now, considering recent inflationary pressures and global market conditions, it is fair to say that these amounts have increased since that work was completed. So although positive strides have been made over the years to increase utility reserves, significant investment is still required to support the long-term needs of the community, especially as we continue to see escalating construction costs. So what does this asset management commitment look like in actual dollars? This table shows us not only how compounding has helped district reserve levels, but it also illustrates how council's 5-year commitment has been shaping our reserves. Organizationally, council has tripled the amount of funds allocated to utility reserves over this 5-year span, and in total will have allocated $6.79 million into reserves over this period. This is a huge step in the district's overall asset management journey, and the effects of these decisions will be discussed further when we look at each of the individual 5-year capital plans. Now, I wanted to highlight a few things on this page before we move on. Firstly, in 2023, the 5% water and 3.5% sewer annual allocations were deferred by council, in part due to the removal of the 10% discount, as well as inflationary cost pressures. However, due to the elimination of that 10% discount, the district was able to direct more money into sewer and electrical reserves in 2023, and is why the contribution in the electrical utility is higher in 2023 than in 2024. On the electric side, council has earmarked a $447,000 transfer as an asset management reserve allocation in 2024. And finally, due to the ever-increasing costs of treating water and the operational rate increase required to balance the water budget this year, council is proposing to defer the 5% asset management reserve contribution in the water utility for another year. This is the second year of such a deferral, and these contributions have now been pushed to 2025 and to 2026. So the first utility that we will look at today is also the largest in terms of its operational budget size, the electric utility. The district is one of 5 municipalities in BC that operates its own electric utility. We purchase wholesale power from Fortis and sell it to our residents. Some of the services, or cost centers as I call them, associated with the electric utility are administration, which has a budget of $1.4 million. Electric power that we buy from Fortis is budgeted at $10.9 million. Our system operations, $1.6 million. Brushing, $194,000. Meter reading and maintenance, $284,000. Underground locates, $48,000. Transfers to our capital reserves are $1.1 million, and a dividend to the general fund of $500,000 annually. So in all, the 2024 budget for these services is proposed at $16.1 million, the largest amount being $10.9 million that is paid to Fortis BC for our wholesale power. Overall, electrical expenses have increased 5.2%, or $795,000 over the prior year budget. And as the mayor touched on in his introduction, the major driving force behind this increase is Fortis BC's wholesale power increase. We have budgeted for a 6.74% Fortis increase, which based on estimated consumption, increases our power costs by $700,279 over last year. On the revenue side, although Fortis is increasing their rates by 6.74%, the district is only proposing a 3% rate increase, largely in part because of the billing changes that were made last year. Now, on the last slide, we touched on the major driving force behind this year's budget increase, i.e. Fortis's wholesale power cost. This slide provides more detail on some of the other factors that make up the rest of the budget changes. So internally, we've done some reorganization and we've reallocated $16,000 of administrative salaries out of the electrical utility and put them into other service areas. In 2023, council budgeted for a full-time engineering technologist position in the electrical utility. That was to start in July. So in 2024, we now require the extra or the other 6 months of that salary. So an increase of $53,000. We are looking at purchasing $100,000 worth of electrical meters this year. And as everyone is most likely aware, the new solar and battery energy, or the Summerland Energy Center, is now up and operational. And in terms of maintenance on that center, we have budgeted $21,000. As an aside, in terms of that Summerland Energy Center, as I noted, it currently is online and generating power. The system has been online for about a month, for the month of November. And in that time, it has generated enough power for 40 homes, which is about 40,000 kilowatt hours. So that's a good performance for the dark winter month of November. And we anticipate seeing that continue on. A few additional projects. We are looking at doing a brushing assessment this year for $15,000. We did complete our vault condition assessment last year, so it is coming out of the operational budget this year. And we are looking at rewriting regulations and looking at some grant writing services. In terms of capital, the district's proposed 2024 capital plan consists of 12 capital projects totaling $2.68 million. The 3 underground projects on this list make up 48% of this budget, or $1.285 million. I'm going to pass the presentation over to our Director of Utilities, Mr. Jeremy Storvold, who will provide some more context on each of the noted projects. So Jeremy, if you can jump in, please.
Thanks, Dave. So let's go over these projects one by one here. The radio and repeater system replacement. This project's to upgrade the district radio system. This is a system that our staff use to communicate truck to truck and back here to the Works Infrastructure office. And the electric utility is taking a portion of that cost as a capital expense because the electric utility does utilize that system. The next one is fiber system upgrades. This project is to continuing upgrading our fiber network. This is a network that we have our IT services on and our SCADA system for our water and electric utilities. The electric utility portion is under development, so that's why this cost is here. Next, we have the Parkdale offsite improvements. This is the electric servicing portion of this project, which we expect that the electric utility will be funding if that project goes ahead. Service connections and capacity upgrades. This is a little bit of capital for parts of the electric system that are over capacity. The James Avenue property upgrades. The district recently purchased property next to our works yard here on Cedar Avenue, which is where I'm sitting right now. This funding is to expand the electric utility equipment storage into that new property that we purchased. Prairie Valley, Wharton, Victoria and Wharton underground upgrades. This project is part of our downtown plan and envisions upgrades to our Wharton Street. And so we're seeing the power line move underground along Wharton. And that's what this capital item is for. The Kelly Wharton Brown streetlight upgrades. This is to purchase and install the missing streetlights that are in our downtown area, and we'll follow up after a council decision on which streetlight style to purchase, and it will coincide with our downtown plan. So that project's been waiting for the downtown plan to be moved along. And pole replacements, just like the name suggests, this is to replace power poles that have reached end of life. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Jeremy. So as a proposed 5-year capital plan shows, electrical projects are expensive and they can range into the millions of dollars. However, with council's commitment over the years of increasing reserve contributions, I am happy to note that the proposed 5-year capital plan is fully funded and does not include any proposed borrowing. This slide shows projected reserve and surplus levels over the next 5 years based on said proposed capital plan. And as we just noted on the previous slide, the entire 5-year financial plan will be funded without the requirement of utilizing any debt funds. The second utility that we will look at is wastewater, or more commonly known as the sewer utility. The sewer utility's primary cost centers include administration, which is budgeted at $449,000, sewage collection and treatment, $1.14 million, the sandy dump station, $8,000, our lift station maintenance is $78,000, sludge removal is $301,000. Preventative maintenance, $32,000. Our capital reserve transfers are $486,000, and our debt charges are $263,000. So in all, the 2024 budget for these services is proposed at $2.75 million. Now, to get to this point, council had to make some decisions on the revenue side in order to balance this budget. So when council was presented with their first look at the 2024 sewer budget, this is what they saw. The utility had a $685,500 deficit. And to put that into context, a 1% sewer rate increase generates approximately $17,355 in additional revenues. So to cover the deficit through rates would have required a 39.5% rate increase. The most significant driving force behind this deficit is the extinguishment of debt that was taken on 25 years ago to build the sewer treatment plant. As many of you know, the final debt payment for the construction of the sewer treatment plant was paid in 2023. Now, unfortunately, this had significant operational consequences, and specifically on the revenue side of our ledger. The overall financial implications related to the extinguishment of the sewer treatment plant debt are summarized on this slide. In terms of the expenditure impacts, there are $427,072 in principal and interest payments that no longer need to be made. The impacts on the revenue side are a little more severe. Due to the repayment of the debt, the district will lose $230,619 of Okanagan Basin Water Board funding. Additionally, the $200 parcel tax levy associated with the initial debt borrowing also falls off the table. So, which equates to an additional $738,600 in lost revenue. So overall, the sewer utility has or had a $542,147 debt funding shortfall, which is the primary driver of the overall utility deficit. Now, when staff began looking at the sewer budget in August this year, this shortfall was expected, as since the inception of the parcel tax 25 years ago, there have been additional parcels that have been placed onto the sewer parcel tax roll. The funds collected from these properties have been utilized to firstly pay up for the sewer treatment plant debt. Any remaining amounts have been used to pay operational costs, as well as fund reserve contributions, which over time have put the district into the position we now find ourselves in. We need to either implement a large rate increase correction or establish a new parcel tax to ensure the financial stability of the fund. Looking at this from a slightly different lens, when the debt was taken on back in 1998, principal and interest payments were $688,100, while parcel taxes collected at that time were only $538,000. So the remaining $150,000 was collected through the OBWB grant. Over the years, as interest rates were reset, these payments decreased to $427,000. However, with these resets, the district allocated the debt reductions into capital reserve contributions, which still required a funding source, and is why the parcel tax amounts have always stayed consistent over time. After a healthy discussion at the budget table, in order to balance the budget, council chose to reestablish the $200 parcel tax for a 4-year period. One reason for not choosing a longer period ties into the second point on the screen. Throughout this process, staff have been reviewing other local governments' sewer billing models, and based on council direction, we will be exploring alternative solutions that may help reduce the district's operating deficit by increasing overall revenues. Alternatives other municipalities use vary from billing based off of a percentage of metered water consumption to flat rate charges based on a property's usage. So, i.e., a restaurant is charged differently than a single family residence, which is charged differently than a winery. This type of review can be quite extensive and labor intensive, and council has provided a 4-year window to see this initiative become implemented. So in front of you now is the revised sewer operations budget, after taking into account the wastewater treatment plant debt and parcel taxes. Like the electrical budget, the sewer budget is a baseline budget. No real big operational changes from where we expect 2023 to end, outside of the wastewater treatment plant debt, which we've already discussed. Contractual obligations, such as collective agreement increases and janitorial contract increases, have also been taken account into this budget. When we look at revenue, as a standalone utility, it should not come as a surprise to see the majority of the revenue being collected coming from user fees and parcel taxes. 2.5 million of the 2.75 million. This is very common in utilities whose primary revenue sources are the fees that users pay. On the expense side, once we take the debt payments out of the equation, sewer operational costs have increased 12.2%, or $218,154. Of this increase, 57% is attributed to 11 projects at the wastewater treatment plant and within our lift stations. Additionally, the budget includes $21,000 to reintroduce a co-op student position for the summer months, as well as an increase in engineering services and small contracts to better reflect historical actuals and current market rates. So taking all of that into account, inflationary pressures are driving the 2024 budget up by $72,154, which is equivalent to 4%, which is less than the predicted 2024 inflation rate of 4.7%. Our proposed 2024 capital plan consists of 8 capital projects totaling $6.28 million. 2 of these projects, Deer Ridge Sewer Expansion and the construction of a second primary clarifier, make up the vast majority of the plan, 77%, or $4.83 million. Now, in terms of the projects on the screen, I will once again turn things over to Mr. Storvald to provide some more context into what these are.
Thanks again, Dave. Okay, we'll go by one again here. Primary clarifier. This project's to add a second primary clarifier to the wastewater treatment plant. The primary clarifier is one of the first parts of the wastewater treatment process right after the screening works. We need this second clarifier for a couple of reasons. First is for some of the regulatory changes since the plant was built in the 90s. One of those new regulations is that we need to have redundant primary clarifiers. So this would be our second primary clarifier. The second reason is the wastewater treatment plant is at or nearing capacity. And so this is the first step to adding capacity to that plant. Filter building renovation. This project is to provide forklift access to our newly converted warehouse at the wastewater plant. The Parkdale housing offset improvements. Once again, this is the wastewater servicing portion of the project, which we expect will be funded through the wastewater budget. Deer Ridge and Taylor Place construction. This is construction for wastewater collection system expansion into the Deer Ridge area. The treatment plant pump replacement and upgrades. We have 5 pumps at the wastewater plant that need to be replaced, and this is a project to replace those pumps. We have the Headworks fine screen spare. This is an on-the-shelf spare for the FineWorks screen, which is a critical first component to the wastewater treatment system. And the one that we have now needs maintenance, so we need to take it out of service. So this is a spare that we can move into place while we do maintenance on the existing one. And then we have a collection system expansion study, key industrial areas, and this is a study to expand the collection system into the Bentley industrial area and the Industrial Ave industrial area. Back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Jeremy. So again, as we can see from the proposed 5-year capital plan, which is online, again, sewer projects, just like all projects, are expensive and can range into the millions of dollars. Although council has made concerted efforts over the years in allocating additional funds into sewer capital reserves, in order to move some of the identified projects forward, borrowing is required. Overall, the proposed capital plan includes 2 projects budgeted to cost $8.1 million that require debt financing. Now, before we jump to the financial impacts of what that borrowing looks like, I want to highlight something I brought up earlier in the presentation. Because council has put a concerted effort into increasing reserve contributions over the last 5 years, You'll recall reserve contributions have tripled over that time. This provides the ability to not have to fully fund projects through debt. As I just noted, there are 2 projects budgeted at $8.1 million. However, because we do have capital reserves, we will only need to borrow $6 million. So the first project that is budgeted to be debt financed is the construction of a second primary clarifier. Now, before we get into the details of the borrowing that are on screen, I just want to highlight some assumptions that have been used in the calculations on this slide, as well as the next one. So firstly, the term of the loan is based on a 20-year term at an indicative interest rate of 4.98%. Rate increases are projected, and projected annual household increases are based off estimated 2023 actuals, so these could change. And lastly, both scenarios are based off the premise of zero assistance from upper levels of government. So these are worst case scenarios. So in terms of this project, the budget for this project is $2.7 million with construction to begin hopefully sometime in 2024. As the bullet point notes, we are only borrowing $1.23 million of that, and we are using $1.5 million from our reserves. Public assent is required. There is a council report coming to the December 19th council meeting in terms of funding of this project and the term from an AAP perspective, and the AAP would begin in the early January 2024. Estimated annual debt payments are $106,361, which in today's rates would require a 6.13% rate increase, which would cost your typical household $27.01 annually. And this is the last point to note on this slide. Borrowing would occur in 2024 in the fall, with the rate increase coming into effect in 2025. The second project that project debt financing is the construction of a bioreactor. The budget for this project currently is $4.8 million, with construction to begin in 2027. Again, public assent is required, and we are anticipating that to start in the third quarter of 2026. The estimated debt payments on this project, $411,209, which would require a rate increase of 23.69%, again, based on 2023 dollars. And that would increase a typical household's annual sewer rate by $104.39. Borrowing for this project, it would occur in 2027, and the rate increase itself would come into play in 2028. This slide shows projected reserve and surplus levels over the next 5 years based on the proposed capital plan. And as we just noted on the last 2 slides, it also takes into consideration debt financing of $6 million over that period. Our final utility that we will look at and discuss today is our water utility. The water utility's primary cost centers include, again, administration, which has a budget of $745,000. Treatment, $2.1 million. Distribution, $1.2 million. Dam maintenance, $264,000. Hydrant maintenance, $109,000. Debt charges are $1.77 million. Capital reserve transfers are $1 million. Meter maintenance, $417,000, and preventative maintenance, $44,000. So in all, the 2024 budget for these services is proposed at $7.7 million. Now, like the sewer utility, to get to this point, council had to make some decisions on the revenue side in order to balance this budget. When council was presented with their first look at the 2024 water budget, this is what they saw. The utility had a $354,389 deficit. Council was presented with 3 alternative options on how to balance the budget, and after much discussion settled on an overall rate increase of 6.78%. So just like our other 2 budgets, the proposed water utility budget is a baseline budget. It considers contractual increases, third-party rate increases such as ICBC and our insurance premium increases, as well as operational projects approved by council. When we look at revenue, the majority of the revenue being collected, 88.5%, or $6.8 million, is coming from user fees and parcel taxes. And like the sewer utility, this is very common in utilities whose primary revenue sources are the fees that users pay. Overall, 2024 budgeted water expenses are projected to increase 6.6%, or $477,900. And just like last year, the primary driver of our operational increase is chemical and coagulant pricing, in which the district is a price taker. The overall projected increase in these required treatment products is $247,100. This equates to 52% of the overall increase in the 2024 budget that we just talked about. So after taking the chemicals into account, our overall budgeted expenses have increased by 3.2%, or $230,000. Of that increase, more than 50%, $140,000, is attributed to 6 projects budgeted within our 13 pump stations. Additionally, we are required to perform additional water testing based on the source water assessment that was completed in 2023 for $15,000. So when we factor everything in, inflationary pressures are driving the 2024 budget up by $75,800, which equates to 1.05%. And like the sewer utility, that is less than the predicted 2024 inflation rate of 4.7%. Our proposed 2024 capital plan consists of 16 capital projects totaling $6.77 million. 2 of these projects, the completion of Dale Meadows water main replacement and the Eisentalk Dam spillway construction, make up 49% of that, $3.3 million. We were fortunate enough to receive grant funding for the Eisentalk Dam project in the amount of $1.9 million, which also helped keep our reserve levels up and did not require us to take on debt for this project. Now, in terms of the projects themselves, I will once again hand things over to Mr. Storville to speak on these projects.
Hello again. Okay, starting at the top, Dale Meadows water main replacement. So that project started this year. If you've been down Dale Meadows, you can see that it's been paved, and that was only part of the project. So we'll be completing that in 2024. Giant's Head upstream water separation design. So this project is to complete the design for the Giant's Head Road system separation. Domestic second service meter installations. So there's 240 seasonal service meters that need to be installed. Prairie Valley Road water main replacement. As per our roads and water master plan, this is the water utility portion of that infrastructure upgrade project. Victoria Road system separation upgrade. This is designed for more system separation. Lima Block replacement. This is a component of the water treatment plant, and is part of the water treatment treating process, and is end of life. It needs replacement. PRV above ground upgrades. This is to replace another pressure reducing station. We've been moving these pressure reducing stations from underground to above ground, which gives better access for our employees and no confined space. So we're doing those on a yearly basis. The water treatment plant pump replacements. This is for, just like the wastewater plant, this is for a number of pumps that need to be replaced in the water plant. And here we have 5 of those. The water treatment plant controls upgrade. This is a project to replace our control system at the water treatment plant. That system is no longer supported by the manufacturer, so we need to replace that equipment because currently you can't purchase replacement parts. Source water protection plan, as just like the title says, we're going to be developing our protection plan in 2024. Cathodic protection upgrades. These are sacrificial anodes that we place underground near our water mains, and it's to protect the water main from corrosion. The Parkdale offsite improvements, once again, that project, if it goes ahead, this is the water service portion, which we intend to fund through the water utility. Back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Jeremy. So, like the other two capital budgets, water projects can range into the millions of dollars and are expensive. Council has made concerted efforts over the years in allocating additional funds into the water capital reserves. However, in order to move some of these projects forward, borrowing is required. Overall, the proposed capital plan includes 3 projects totaling $11.5 million in borrowing. So the first project that is budgeted to be funded is the conversion from chlorine gas to sodium hypochlorite at the water treatment plant. And like the sewer utility, I just want to highlight a couple of assumptions that have been used in these calculations. The same assumptions, the term, 20-year term, the indicative interest rate, 4.98%. The rate increases and projected annual household increases are based off of 2023 estimated actuals. So these numbers could change. And again, all 3 scenarios are based off of zero assistance from upper levels of government. So in terms of this project, the budget for this project is $2.4 million with a construction to begin in 2025. With every capital budget borrowing that we have, we are required to get public assent. Our estimated annual debt payments, $204,414, which require a rate increase of 3.91%. And that equates to a $35.78 annual increase per the typical household. In this instance, borrowing would occur in the fall of 2025, with the rate increases to start in 2026. The second project, the Victoria Road System Separation Upgrade. This project is budgeted at $2.2 million. Again, public assent required. The estimated annual debt payments are $185,769. A 2023 rate increase looks like a 3.55%. And the approximate annual increase is $32.49 per household. This borrowing would kick in 2025, again with the rate increase the following year in 2026. And the third project that we have is the Trout Creek flume and water intake replacement. This project is budgeted at $6.95 million. I don't have the year there. It should say 2028 is when this project is slated to start construction. Public assent again required. The estimated annual debt payments on this project are $592,688, which would require a rate increase of 11.33%, which would cost $103.68 annually to the typical household. So like the other 2 utilities, this slide shows projected reserve and surplus levels over the next 5 years based on the proposed capital plan. And as we just talked about on our last 3 slides, it also takes into consideration debt financing of $11.5 million over this 5-year period. So what does this all mean to you, the residents of Summerland? Well, in terms of water, a 6.78% rate increase works out to $62.04 annually a year. or $5.17 a month. As the mayor noted at the beginning of his presentation, sewer is not having a rate increase this year. However, as noted on the bottom of the screen here, we are looking at reestablishing the $200 parcel tax for a 4-year period. A 3% electrical increase increases annual user fees by $51.36. So overall, the cost for a typical residential home on the utility rates is $113.40 annually, which works out to $9.45 a month. This concludes the Districts of Summerland's virtual 2024 utility budget and rates open house. We do thank everyone who attended and ask that any comments you have be sent to the email address on your screen, budget@summerland.ca. I do see that there are a couple participants that aren't council members or staff on the line. So with that, I will open things up for questions if anyone does have any questions. And we're going to unmute everybody now. So if you do have a question, please speak up. If not, again, thank you. And we will hopefully see you at our general fund open house, which is in January. So I don't see anyone asking to be unmuted or raising their hand. So thank you all and have a good evening.